So recently, two students from 100x school got into cal.com as interns.
साले बताया क्यों नहीं? अच्छा यहाँ पे इतने एप्लीकेंट्स
And interestingly, I was talking to one of them today. What he asked me was very peculiar. He said, Kirat, I have an option of converting full-time at Cal, and hopefully that happens. But just in case that doesn't happen, what should I focus on for the next 6 months? Should I be spending my time learning Web3? Should I spend more time on AI? What markets should I target? And I could tell he was very future-looking. Being future-looking is a very underrated skill in tech because the industry changes very quickly. In this video, we'll look at the job market in 2025. That's primarily my role here at 100x School to get people placed, what kind of companies are hiring, and more than that, what mindset do you need to carry in case you're looking for a job in tech. With that, let's get into the video. We'll kick things off with the most obvious point, which is related to firing and less hiring today. I think this is a known truth since 2022. If you look at the graph of hiring on Indeed over the years, it's plateaued to 2020 levels now. The new job openings aren't as high as they used to be during the COVID era. My prediction is 2026 is going to be even worse. There's a high probability of a recession next year, and if that happens, along with less hiring, there'll be more aggressive firing. If you've followed the charts until now, Microsoft, a company that's notorious for not laying off employees, a company that's famous that lets you coast throughout your career, recently laid off 6% of their workforce. If a company that holds that stature can lay off publicly, a founder who's barely able to make runway will have no shame in firing employees. In fact, today, you can clearly see, unless you're providing value to a company, there's no real shame for a founder to fire you. It's a very value-driven market. If the company not just wants you, but needs you extensively, has a high dependency on you, the probability of getting laid off is there. Because tech growth has sort of plateaued, and one way to cut costs is to cut down engineering costs, which is arguably a fairly high proportion of expenses in tech companies. The learning over here is don't quit, don't coast in a company for sure, especially if you're in a startup, but I think this is true even for big tech today. If you are coasting, then there's a high probability you're on the radar of managers to get fired in the next cycle. And unfortunately, that's how we're supposed to think right now, because tech jobs and techies are highly commoditized right now. And with the advent of AI, it becomes easier for mildly junior developers to fake that they're senior developers. So the senior developer, if you're coasting, it might just make sense for someone to hire a junior developer who can do as well as you, if not more, by putting in more hours and with the help of AI. Generally, the best thing you can do is have a lot of dependency on yourself. That means if there's a new product that's coming out or there are existing products that are doing really well, if the revenue of a company depends on a specific product or a specific team, then there's lower probability of getting fired in that team. For example, I used to work at a company where 30% of the workforce was laid off, including engineering. But there were two teams that were untouched. There was the DevOps team and the video team, because these were the most important functions. These were the functions that were hard to hire for. And hence, the company was a little wary. Even though the salaries over here were much higher than normal engineering jobs, the companies were wary to fire engineers from here. Slowly, some engineers left. Slowly, some of them were laid off. But in the bigger, massive layoff, no one was touched from the DevOps or the video team. With that, let's move to the next point. The senior engineer market, is this still true? And unfortunately, it is. This is purely a function of supply and demand, as there are more senior engineers out in the market whose salaries have plateaued or who have been laid off. They're open to work, sometimes at lesser salaries than what they were being paid in their cushy job. And unfortunately, at least in the very first screening round, their profile looks much better compared to a junior engineer. And arguably, this is true. If there's a senior engineer who has experiential learning on ground compared to someone who's just built personal projects, it makes sense for the senior engineer to clear the screening round. Now, it might happen that the senior engineer has coasted in their initial job. They're not really aware of the tech stack or many tech stacks, or they can't be very agile, which eventually shows up in later rounds of interviews or once they join. But at the first look, companies would want to hire or at least interview senior engineers compared to someone who's just starting out. As someone who's not yet gotten into the job market, this is what I would do. Number one, I would code aggressively myself. I think one thing people lack a lot right now is coding themselves, having muscle memory in coding in a specific language. And unfortunately, this could be a very uncle take as well. But most, like back in the day, people said you should write code in assembly, you shouldn't write it in C. But today, no one writes code in assembly. It might be true we're vibe coding our way, in the next 10 years and everyone's just writing code in English. Right now, though, at least in an interview process, they're going to check if you have some level of, idea of the syntax. If you have an error, you're able to debug it yourself, because at some point, during some problem statement, during some interview, the LLM will hallucinate. And then can you actually dive deeper into the problem and try to solve it yourself? This is something a lot of junior engineers lack, because most of the time they've copied project, cloned projects, done projects in a very hand-holdy fashion. They've not gotten their hands dirty. And the learning from this point is get your hands as dirty as possible. It'll automatically happen if you like coding, but Coding was an acquired taste from the beginning. Most people started to do it in pursuit of money and eventually started to like it. I did the same. But eventually, 20 and everyone was borrowing money. There were stimulus checks. So there was a lot of money in the market to be thrown away. And every startup and their mother was getting funded for a lot of money. Now, a lot of those startups have run out of runway. Some of them have gotten acquired. Some of them have returned money to the investors. There's no clear sign of incredible amount of funding or very high multipliers in funding unless you're an AI company today. Other than that, there's a low probability you'll have fuck you money as a startup. Fuck you hiring happens when you have fuck you money. If you have a lot of money and VCs want to see you grow quickly is when you hire aggressively. That is only true for AI companies today, and you need a very specific skill set to get in there. We'll talk more about that soon enough. But generally, assume in most enterprise companies, big tech, general startups that are catering to the Indian market or even abroad, unless the startup is in a very specific niche that's growing really quickly. For example, Lovable is a good example of this that grew at a very rapid pace. And even they did not have to hire as aggressively as a startup would have had to in case they were growing at the pace at which Lovable is. Unless that happens, hiring will remain the same. Companies are overly cautious while hiring. Companies are very open to hire and fire. So you have to get comfortable in this mindset. It will happen if you have the right skills. I think most good engineers are fairly free or, carefree. Even in this market, I have friends who are, just not happy with their current jobs, have 50, 60 LPA jobs, yet are open to just resign and, they'll figure things out. They know for a fact they'll figure something out. Eventually, it might not be 60 LPA, might be 40 LPA. But good engineers always have that thing at the back of their head, that comfort at the back of their head, compared to someone who's just starting out. And there I totally understand the anxiety. Generally, I would assume though that things are going to be bad for another year unless you're in a specific niche like AI or Web3. And for that, and in that case, you should prepare for longer interview cycles, getting ghosted, applying a lot yet getting rejected, lower salary packages, just a part of the trade and tech or every industry runs in cycles. Here is a video by Paras Chopra that says the same.
It always have bull and bear phases. It just everything in the world runs in cycles. So yes, it will have a bull run. You just don't know when. Because when you work on fundamentals, not just acquire the knowledge for that fundamentals, but you actually acquire the confidence for problem solving. If you're able to work at a very deep level in any field, then you have a confidence that you are thrown a new problem, you can solve it instead of having a very surface level understanding of some libraries and so on. All of these come and go.
At some point, there will be a hype cycle when that happens. If you're positioned well, you can make a lot of money. If not, then you can still make some money. But if you're preparing for the bull, then the bull market can be super lucrative. With that, we'll move on to the next point. Next point, this one is on stress and the mindset that is needed during a bear market. How can you ensure you're doing the right things? How can you mentally prepare to work really hard when you know the cycle is not in your favor? Generally, you need small dopamine hits here, which basically means you should get a job. I think getting the very first job is a decent dopamine hit. It gives you a small paycheck at the same time, lets you focus on bigger things, just like the initial example that I gave, where someone got into cal.com but is still making sure in the worst case he has other skills in case he's not able to convert full time. I think that only happens when you have the very first offer. So what you should focus on, at least what we focus on here in Super 30, is that people should just somehow get into the industry. A lot of experiential learning that happens over there eventually translates to, better jobs with a little bit of luck and a little bit of, you still loving to code once you're in your job. And of course, the team and things like these. Generally, what I'm seeing right now is people are preparing for doomsday somehow, okay? They've sort of imagined/hoped that AI is going to take everyone's job, and that gives them a little bit of comfort. Knowing no one will make money in tech, so even if I don't make money, it's fine. I don't think that will happen though. I think you will always need someone to scream at or an engineer to handle, certain parts of the code base. You might need less engineers. A single engineer might be able to handle a bigger code base. You might have too many products that come out, and hence a single company might be able to ship out a lot of products. There might be too many niche products that come out. There might be more tech products in general, we don't know yet. What I do know for a fact is a founder will not have an army of AI agents doing everything, including customer support and engineering and design and sales. So most probably, again, these are all assumptions. 99%, the concept of an employee will still exist, and I'm unsure if the role of an engineer would change too much. If you sort of believe in this mindset, then that gives you the hope to keep coding even if you don't have a paycheck or a job right now. Versus if you're prepping for doomsday, what I've seen is most people are chilling, and unfortunately we're in times where it's very easy to chill and spend time, doom scrolling or gaming, which again, as humans we've grown and evolved to have comfortable lifestyles, and if that's what you like, sure. But remember, if there's ever a bull, or generally as you see friends eventually getting jobs, a friend of yours who might be struggling right now but eventually getting a 10 LPA job and then maybe a 20 LPA job, you may or may not feel the regret of spending your time doing cushy things. So if you're young, I would generally avoid spending my time on things that are too comfortable. I would spend most of my time coding. If I am wrong and AI replaces everyone, well, in the process, at least you learn something new rather than spending your time entertaining yourself. With that, we'll move to the last point, which is what I think would be the winners of 2026. What coding skills would I learn? What language would I spend my time learning? What industries would I spend my time understanding better? And I have very obvious answers over here, which I've been saying for a while, which is either AI or Web3. Why? Because not a lot of engineers are very open to get into these markets. Most engineers have jobs and cushy jobs. In one of many things, full stack, backend databases, low level engineering, trading, finance, and new industries are, even though they want to get into it, they don't have enough time or energy to spend to learn those technologies. Yet these technologies are growing really quickly, and there's demand for engineers here. So if you have free time, or if you're unemployed, and if you think you're smart enough to get into these industries or learn these industries, which is very obvious to tell if you read the GPT-2 paper and you can understand it, or if you read the Bitcoin white paper and you are able to understand it. One of these options will sort of tell you which industry you're more interested in. If you don't like math, probably you'll not like the GPT-2 paper. If you don't like consensus or distributed systems, if you don't like distributed systems, you'll probably not like the Bitcoin white paper. So amongst these two, try to figure out which one do you like reading. And then that's probably the industry you want to go after. Each one of these industries requires database engineers, distributed system engineers, low-level programmers. So it's not like that skill sort of goes away. It's a little bit about the mindset and very specific nuances of that industry. There are certain things you need to know if you're a Web3 engineer. Around blockchains, tokens, coins, DeFi, there are certain things you need to know as an AI engineer. Around what is a transformer, how does it work, how do image models work. These involve a little more effort along with your full-time job of a mobile engineer, backend engineer. If you're able to spend that time doing them, then inevitably these companies are going to have roles for full-stack engineers or mobile engineers or front-end engineers that you can target. If you have a little bit of alpha about that industry, and if you have connects, and by connects I mean people that you know who are working in that industry, that's where I would spend my, let's say 6 months of 2025 prepping for a job in 2026. This is a very common, question here at Super 30 as well. Should I go for AI? Should I go for Web3? It's like full stack doesn't exist. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think your very first job is going to be, some level of full stack, front end, back end, database, working in a standard company, because there are too many such companies and applications compared to very less AI companies and Web3 companies and openings. That said, that's a very common question. I've tried to give as best of an answer as I could, which is read the Bitcoin white paper, read the GPT-2 paper, and try to see which one interests you more and go from there. And in conclusion, all I'd like to say is the world is against you. Recession is really high. Companies are not hiring. Companies are firing with no shame. That's probably going to continue. If you really look at it, it's a good thing. It means people are actually getting jobs based on the value that they're providing, and the hype from the tech market has gone away. If you're actually a good engineer who likes computer science, there's a very high probability you get placed at one of many tech companies that exist. Tech still runs the world, and eventually, currency is probably going to get replaced by Web3, and a lot of full stack applications are either going to get replaced or will get evolved with AI. These are the growing industries. That's where I would spend my time. Step one over there is though learning how to code, being able to build simple applications, and going from there. So the fundamentals remain the same. The question really is who's working hard to achieve those and who's started to coast. With that, we'll end it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye. मक्खी भाई सामने ही घूम रही है एकदम कैमरा के. ये मच्छर तुम्हारे साइड गया.